Now, before I mix, if you've noticed, I've touched a lot of things this morning with my gloves, including the patient. And now I'm about to touch things that are not contaminated. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my gloves off. I'm going to give myself a little hand sanitizer. And I'm going to pre-mix my alginate measurements for each tray. So I have 2 bowls here, and I have 2 spatulas. And you're going to get this in your kit next year. And we also have some alginate. Now, and also we have a measuring graduated cylinder and a scoop here to scoop out the alginate. Now, before we start, I like to just to shake up the alginate a little bit to get a little more even mix, and also just kind of dense it up a little bit by just tapping it on the table. Obviously this is not dustless, because if you do buy dustless alginate, when you open the lid, you don't get all this fine dust coming through. And I like to work with dustless alginate, but this is what it looks like. I'm not sure if you can get a look in there. All right. So with clean hands, I'm going to take a measuring scoop, and I'm going to measure out 2 scoops per impression. 1, 2. Now, in some literature, they'll tell you to put the water in before the alginate. In my years of experience, I think if you have a nice vigorous mix, it really doesn't make a big difference. Okay, so we measured out 2 scoops per impression. I'm also going to take this other spatula out of the bag and just leave it on the side there. And from here on, we're going to use our graduated cylinder here, and I'm not sure if you can see it. There's a level indicator for each scoop. So we got 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3. Now, generally speaking, you want to go to the level that you've measured out in scoops, but I tend to go a little bit lower, okay, to get a little more of a thicker mix. Now, granted, if you have a lot of mobile tissue, you want to have a little more of a looser mix than a denser mix, okay? So I'm going to go a little bit less, and also the temperature of the water has a big effect how fast the alginate will set. If you notice here on the tub, on the side of the tub, it says fast setting alginate. So this probably takes about, you have about 30 seconds to work with by the time you introduce water into the mix and start spatulating it, and you probably got another 30 seconds in the patient's mouth. So you got to be quite fast, okay? Over time, this will seem like a lot of time as you become more experienced. There's also regular set alginate, which gives you probably twice the working time, but it gets a little uncomfortable for the patient being in their mouth for so long, okay? All right, so this being fast set, if you use room temperature water, it will accelerate the setting time, so it will reduce your working time. So in the initial impressions that you work with your clients, you might want to use relatively colder water to prolong the working time, so you have a little more time to work with it, okay? So I'm going to put my gloves back on. And before I introduce the water into the mix, we want to make sure that our patient is comfortable. We got the chair at the right height, so I'm going to be doing the lower impression first because it's a little easier for the patient, and it gives them a chance to kind of reorient themselves with the taste and the smell of the material. So generally speaking, for a lower impression, you want to have the patient around elbow height, okay, where you are, so you're not bending over too much. So at this point, it's a nice, a comfortable level for me to retract the cheek and enter with the tray, okay? If we're going to be doing the maxillary impression, You'd want to lower the chair to about there, and you want to approach the patient from the back and have enough so the patient is low enough so you can lean over and kind of see what's going on in their mouth, okay? So because being lower first, I'm going to bring them back up a little bit. We're going to start there. So everything is ready to go, because you want to be organized about this, because once you start mixing your alginate, you want to have access to everything. And you can see here the material. I don't know if you can see it there. It's a little tacky from the cellophane here. So that's good. So when I apply the alginate, this will adhere quite well. All right, so I got my tray here. I'm going to start mixing relatively cold water. There's a little bit of warm that I used before, so make sure that it's not warm, otherwise you probably won't have a chance to introduce it in the patient's mouth. It'll set on you before you even have a chance. Just kind of let it run a little bit more. It's quite warm.
We'll edit this part down.
Yeah, we'll edit it. We can stop.